Hey everyone, and welcome back to Sip and Talk. I'm Joe.
I'm Sunny.
Glad you're tuning in.
Hey everyone, good to be back.
Yeah. So today we're really getting into something fascinating, maybe a little unsettling too.
Definitely unsettling at times.
It's about, well, us, humans, and how, easily we seem to be influenced by everything around us.
Our environment, authority figures, the group we're in. It's kind of wild when you dig into it.
It really is. Makes you question how you actually form your own opinions, why you do the things you do.
Absolutely. And we're going to pull from some really famous psychological experiments today. Classics.
Some pretty controversial ones too, right?
Oh yeah, big time. Studies that kind of blew the lid off how we thought about human nature, revealed some surprising, maybe uncomfortable truths.
Okay. Sounds like perfect deep dive material. So the mission today, let's unpack these big studies.
Yep. What did they actually do? What were the big, sometimes shocking findings?
And the controversies surrounding them, we got to talk about those.
For sure. And crucially, what does all this mean for you listening right now in your day-to-day life?
At work, scrolling online, just dealing with people. How does this stuff play out?
Exactly. We're covering the Hawthorne effect. Being watched changes things. Then the heavier ones, the Stanford prison experiment.
Oh, man.
And Milgram's obedience study, plus the Asch conformity experiment and the bystander effect.
Wow. Okay. Those names definitely ring a bell. The kind of studies you hear about and just pause thinking, wait, people really did that.
They really did. So yeah, get ready. This dive into classic psychology, it might just shift how you see yourself and maybe other people too. It's definitely fuel for critical thinking.
All right, let's jump in. First up, the Hawthorne effect. This one's maybe less dramatic on the surface, but hugely influential.
Totally. Takes us back to the 1920s. Big factory, Western Electric in Illinois.
So what were they even trying to figure out there on the factory floor? Seems pretty basic initially.
Well, the initial goal for researchers like Elton Mayo, it was actually quite practical, very much in line with that whole scientific management thinking of the era.
Like treat workers as parts of a machine, find the optimal settings.
Exactly. They wanted to see if changing physical conditions, like how bright the lights were, or giving more rest breaks would directly make workers produce more. Simple cause and effect, or so they thought.
And they ran specific tests, right? I remember hearing about the lighting experiments.
Yep. They changed the light levels for different groups, trying to isolate that one variable.
And there was that special room, the relay assembly test room, with a small group of women.
That's right. They tweaked all sorts of things for them, breaks, work hours, even how they were paid, trying to pinpoint exactly what change boosted output.
Okay, so what happened? Did better lighting make everyone super productive?
Well, this is where it got really weird and kind of turned everything on its head.
Uh-oh.
The results were baffling. Productivity basically went up no matter what they did.
Wait, what?
Seriously. They increased the light, productivity went up.
Right.
Okay, that makes sense. Then they decreased the light, and productivity still went up.
No way.
Yeah. Even when the light got super dim, like almost too dark to see, output kept climbing until it was physically impossible to work.
That's wild. What about the other changes, like breaks?
Same pattern in the relay assembly room. They changed breaks, hours, pay structures, changed them back. Production usually just kept going up.
Okay, so if it wasn't the lights or the breaks themselves, what was going on? Why were people working harder?
This is the big reveal. The Hawthorne effect. It wasn't the changes in conditions, it was the attention.
The attention.
Yeah. The fact that these workers were being watched, studied, asked questions, the feeling that management actually cared enough about them to experiment and try to improve things, that made them feel special.
So being observed, feeling valued, that was the real motivator.
Pretty much. It made them feel like part of something important, something unique. That psychological boost seemed to outweigh the physical changes.
Wow. That's actually huge.
Yeah.
Feeling seen matters more than better lighting.
Exactly. And they saw hints of this elsewhere, too. They did this massive interview program, thousands of workers just talking about their feelings. And another study, the bank wiring room observation.
Tell me that, Joe.
That showed the power of the informal social group. Workers kind of formed their own cliques with their own rules about how much work was acceptable. Sometimes they'd actually limit production, even if it meant less pay, to stick together and not make anyone else look bad.
So peer pressure within the workplace. Social dynamics are powerful.
Hugely powerful. It really underlined that workers aren't just cogs motivated by cash or conditions. Emotions, relationships, feeling like you belong, being noticed, those are massive drivers.
It really shifted things away from that old efficiency-first model, didn't it?
Absolutely. It challenged that purely scientific management view and gave rise to the whole human relations school of thought in management. Suddenly, it was okay to talk about employee feelings and group dynamics.
People are people. Imagine that.
Groundbreaking stuff for the time. Now, people have critiqued the Hawthorne studies over the years. It's hard to perfectly isolate why people felt motivated. Was it just attention or feeling elite or something else? Some methods were a bit subjective.
Sure, science evolves.
Right. But the core takeaway that just being observed changes behavior.
Yeah.
And that social factors are critical at work, that idea absolutely stuck.
Yeah.
It's still super relevant today.
You can totally see it. Feeling valued versus just getting a raise. Or the downside, feeling stressed because your every click is being monitored.
Totally. Constant observation cuts both ways.
Okay, let's shift gears.
Yeah.
From the factory floor to, something much darker and way more controversial.
Yeah, let's talk about the Stanford prison experiment.
Right, 1971. Philip Zimbardo. This one always gives me the chill.
It's intense. And Zimbardo was actually inspired partly by Milgram's work, which we'll get to. But his question was about the power of the situation.
The situation versus the person.
Exactly. He wanted to know. Take perfectly normal, healthy young men, put them in a simulated prison. Does the environment itself, the roles they're given, change how they act more than their own personalities?
And the setup was pretty elaborate.
Oh, yeah. 24 male college students, screened for health, randomly assigned, half prisoners, half guards. And they built this mock prison in the basement of the Stanford Psych building.
With cells, uniforms, numbers for the prisoners. Mirrored sunglasses for the guards to hide their eyes. They really went for it.
They did, trying to create the psychological atmosphere of a prison.
And things went bad.
Fast, right?
Incredibly fast. It was supposed to last 2 weeks, but participants just sank into their roles with terrifying speed.
What happened?
By day 2, the prisoners rebelled against the conditions. And the guards, they cracked down hard.
Right.
It escalated quickly. Humiliation, arbitrary punishments, making prisoners do degrading things like cleaning toilets with their bare hands, stripping their beds, sleep deprivation.
Oh, man. That's awful. Yeah. Some prisoners started having serious psychological distress, emotional breakdowns. People had to be released early.
And they stopped the whole thing after only 6 days, I heard.
That's right. 6 days out of the planned 14. It was actually Zimbardo's girlfriend at the time, another psychologist who came to observe, who pointed out how ethically wrong it had become and really pushed him to end it.
Wow. So what was Zimbardo's big conclusion from this nightmare?
His main argument was the immense power of the situation. He believed the prison environment and the assigned roles overwhelmed the individual personalities of these normal young men.
The situation made them act that way.
That was his interpretation. He later termed it the Lucifer effect. This idea that good people can be induced to do evil things when placed in a toxic environment or system.
And you can't help but think of real-world parallels, like the abuses at Abu Ghraib.
Exactly. It became a very potent, though highly debated, way to try and understand how those kinds of atrocities can happen. But the controversy around the experiment itself is huge.
Yeah, the ethical problems seem obvious, the harm done to the participants.
Absolutely. That's a major one. And Zimbardo's own role is heavily criticized, too. He wasn't just the researcher. He acted as the prison superintendent.
So he was part of the experiment. That sounds like a conflict of interest.
A huge one, ethically speaking. But beyond the ethics, there are now serious questions about the methodology and the findings themselves.
Like what?
Well, critics have dug into archives and claimed some guards were actually given instructions, or at least strong hints, to be tough. That the cruelty wasn't just spontaneous role-playing.
So they were maybe encouraged?
That's the allegation. There are also claims that one of the most notoriously cruel guards later admitted he was sort of acting, trying to give the researchers what he thought they wanted.
That complicates the power of the situation idea, if people are acting.
It does. And doubts have been raised about whether one prisoner's breakdown was entirely genuine or maybe exaggerated for the study. Plus, a major attempt to replicate the study in the UK, years later, didn't produce the same results at all. The guards didn't become uniformly brutal.
Okay, so how does Zimbardo respond to all this criticism? It sounds pretty significant.
He defends the study. He maintains he told guards to maintain order, but didn't explicitly instruct cruelty, arguing their behavior went far beyond any guidelines.
And the guard who said he was acting?
Zimbardo argues that even if he started acting, the role and the situation took over, leading to genuine escalation. As for the UK replication, he points out key differences. Participants knew it was being filmed for TV. The researchers intervened more directly. He argues it wasn't a fair comparison.
So it's a study with a really tangled legacy, powerful ideas, but serious questions about how it all went down.
Definitely. A landmark, but a deeply flawed one in many ways.
Okay, let's move to the study that partly inspired Zimbardo. Another giant, also super controversial, Milgram's obedience experiment.
Right. Stanley Milgram, Yale, early 1960s. This one came directly out of trying to understand the Holocaust.
The question being, how could ordinary people participate in something so horrific?
Exactly. Milgram wanted to test the limits of obedience. How far would ordinary people go in obeying an authority figure when instructed to do something that conflicted with their conscience, something potentially harmful?
And the setup is just iconic in a disturbing way.
It really is. You have the participant, the actual subject, assigned the role of teacher. Then there's an actor, a Confederate, playing the learner.
And the teacher has to give the learner electric shocks.
Supposedly. They're told it's a study on memory and learning. The teacher reads word pairs. The learner has to recall them. For every mistake the learner makes, the teacher is instructed to administer an electric shock from a machine.
And the shocks get stronger each time.
Yep. The machine has switches labeled with increasing voltage going all the way up to 450 volts. There are labels too, like slight shock, strong shock, eventually danger, severe shock, and just XXX.
Oh my God. And the learner, the actor.
The actor, who isn't actually getting shocked, follows a script. Grunts of pain, protests, complaints about a heart condition, demands to be let out, eventually just chilling silence.
And all the while, the authority figure, the experimenter in a lab coat, is telling the teacher to continue.
Precisely. Using standardized prods, please continue. The experiment requires that you continue. It is absolutely essential that you continue.
Yeah.
And the final one, you have no other choice, you must go on.
So what happened? How many people actually went all the way?
The results shocked everyone, including Milgram. He'd surveyed psychiatrists beforehand who predicted maybe 1% would go to the maximum.
And the reality?
A staggering 65%, almost two-thirds of participants, obeyed the experimenter and went all the way to the 450-volt shock.
65%.
Yes, and every single participant went to at least 300 volts. Even though they showed clear signs of extreme stress, sweating, trembling, stuttering, arguing, laughing nervously, they still obeyed.
That is just deeply disturbing. What does that tell us about ourselves?
It's a powerful, uncomfortable demonstration of the power of authority. How much pressure we feel from someone perceived as a legitimate authority figure, especially within an institutional setting like a university lab.
That pressure can override our own moral compass.
It seems it can for many people. That need to obey or the diffusion of responsibility onto the authority figure can be incredibly strong. It showed situational forces can compel people to act against their values.
Again, echoing that theme from Stanford, the power of the situation, though here it's very specifically about obeying direct orders.
Exactly. Milgram really focused on that dynamic with authority. And its relevance today is undeniable, isn't it?
Totally. Why people follow questionable orders in companies, in the military, even in everyday situations.
Right. It highlights how important it is to be aware of that pressure, to learn to question authority when necessary, and to find the courage to trust your own judgment and say no, even when it's hard.
And, like Stanford, massive ethical concerns here too, right? The stress on the participants must have been immense.
Absolutely. The psychological distress was real and significant, and that's been a central part of the ethical debate about Milgram's work ever since. Necessary research, maybe, but at what cost?
Okay, let's shift to something a bit lighter, maybe. The Asch conformity experiment. This one feels more relatable, like something you might actually experience.
Chuckles. Yeah, maybe less traumatic, but definitely relatable. Think about being in a meeting where you know the group is wrong, but
you don't want to be the only one saying something.
Exactly. Solomon Asch, back in the 1950s, wanted to study exactly that. How group pressure affects individual judgment, even on a really simple, obvious task.
So the setup was pretty clever. You come into a room, you think you're just another participant in a vision test.
Right. But everyone else in the group is actually an actor working for the experimenter.
And the task is simple. Look at a card with one line, Then look at another card with 3 lines at different lengths and say which of the 3 matches the first line.
Easy peasy, right? A straightforward visual perception task. You can clearly see the right answer.
But then comes the twist. On certain trials, all the actors, before you deliberately start giving the same wrong answer.
Yep. One by one, they confidently point to a line that's clearly not the match. And you're sitting there, maybe towards the end of the line.
Knowing they're wrong, but hearing everyone else say it. What did people do?
Well, Ash found that conformity was surprisingly common. On those critical trials where the group unanimously gave the wrong answer, about 37% of the participants' responses also conformed to that wrong answer.
Over a third of the time, people just went along with the obviously wrong group.
Yep. And even more striking, 75% of participants conformed at least once during the experiment. 3/4 of people caved to group pressure at least once.
Wow. So why? Were they genuinely starting to doubt their own eyes or just afraid to stand out?
Ash actually asked them afterwards. It was a mix of both. Some people really did start to question their own judgment. They thought, wow, if everyone else sees it differently, maybe I'm the one who's wrong.
That's informational influence, right? Assuming the group knows better.
Exactly. But others admitted they knew the group was wrong, but they just didn't want to rock the boat. They didn't want to appear foolish or be the odd one out.
Normative influence. Going along to fit in.
That's it. Fear of social disapproval is a powerful thing.
Man, that hits close to home. You think about groupthink in work teams or following social media trends or even just agreeing with friends when you don't really agree.
It's everywhere, isn't it? It really underscores how strong that social pressure can be, making us doubt ourselves or just go against what we believe. It's a huge reminder of the need for independent thinking.
For sure. And like you said, maybe conformity rates have shifted a bit since the 50s. Different contexts matter, but that basic pressure still feels very real.
Absolutely. A timeless dynamic.
One last classic phenomenon to unpack, the bystander effect. This one is sadly familiar sometimes.
Yeah, it is. Often linked to that infamous Kitty Genovese case in New York in 1964. The story initially reported that dozens of people saw or heard her being attacked but did nothing.
Though the details of that specific story are more complex now, right?
They are. Historians have shown the initial reports were exaggerated, but the idea resonated and spurred research by psychologists like Darley and Latane. They wanted to understand why people sometimes don't help when others are present.
So how do they test this?
A common setup involved participants in separate rooms thinking they were part of a group discussion over an intercom system to maintain anonymity.
Okay.
During the discussion, one of the participants, actually a pre-recorded tape, would simulate having a medical emergency, like a seizure, and cry out for help.
Oh, why?
The key manipulation was how many other people the real participant thought were also listening in on that intercom line. Sometimes they thought it was just them and the person in distress. Other times, they thought there were several other witnesses.
And what did they find? Did more witnesses mean more help?
Exactly the opposite, consistently. The more people a participant believed were also hearing the emergency, the less likely that participant was to intervene and try to get help.
Less likely. Why?
And even if they did help, they took significantly longer to respond when they thought others were present.
So if you thought you were the only one who knew, you felt the responsibility. But if you thought a bunch of people knew,
that responsibility gets diffused. That's the core concept. Diffusion of responsibility.
Okay.
When multiple people witness an emergency, the sense of personal obligation to act gets spread thinly across the group. Each individual feels less direct pressure, thinking, someone else will probably call for help, or someone else is more qualified.
Man, you see someone stumble on the street or hear an argument escalate.
Yeah.
If there's a crowd, you feel that hesitation, that pause, assuming someone else has it covered.
That's the bystander effect in action. It's a really stark reminder that simply being in a group doesn't guarantee help. In fact, it can sometimes inhibit it.
So in an emergency, you almost have to consciously fight that instinct and decide, okay, I need to do something.
Exactly. Actively taking responsibility is crucial. It shows how groups can, paradoxically, lead to inaction or apathy in critical moments.
Wow. Okay, stepping back from all these studies, Hawthorne, Stanford, Milgram, Ash, Bystander, they paint a really consistent, if sometimes uncomfortable picture, don't they?
They really do.
We seem incredibly susceptible to our surroundings, to authority, to what the group is doing. Why is that? Why are we, so easily swayed?
It's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And these studies offer some overlapping clues. Part of it seems evolutionary.
Oh, so?
Well, think about our ancestors. We're social animals. Sticking with the tribe, following the leader, that was often the key to survival. Being the lone wolf, challenging the group. That could mean isolation, danger, even death.
So a deep-seated instinct to conform and obey for safety.
Plausibly, yeah. It might be wired in pretty deep. Another piece is just cognitive efficiency. Our brains are lazy.
Tuckles, tell me about it.
Right. Making independent judgments takes effort. Going with the flow, trusting the expert, following the crowd that's often a mental shortcut, saves energy. But as we've seen, those shortcuts can lead us way off course.
Yeah, like in the Ash experiment. Easier to agree than to analyze why you disagree.
Exactly. Then there's that powerful belief in authority Milgram tapped into. We're often trained from a young age to respect titles, uniforms, positions of power. We tend to assume they know best.
And the fear of just being different, standing out.
Huge factor. That fear of exclusion Ash highlighted. We want to belong. We don't want to be rejected or ridiculed, so we conform, even when we have doubts.
And emotions play a massive role too, it seems. Like the power dynamics in Stanford, the anxiety in Milgram.
Absolutely. Fear, power, anxiety, belonging. These feelings profoundly shape how we react in these situations. And, the modern world throws extra challenges into the mix.
Like what?
Information overload, social media echo chambers. These can amplify conformity pressures and make it even harder to encounter genuinely different perspectives.
Oh, totally. Think about investing, that fear of missing out FOMO.
Classic example.
Everyone's jumping on, say, AI stocks because they're hot. You see it everywhere online, people talking about making fortunes.
Yeah.
It creates this immense pressure to join in.
Yeah. Even if you haven't done your own research on the actual companies, you just follow the herd because it feels safer or more exciting than sitting out. That's conformity bias driving financial decisions.
Scary stuff when you think about it that way. So this leads to the really crucial question. How do we fight back?
Right.
How do we resist these powerful pulls towards conformity and obedience? How do we cultivate that critical thinking we talk about and actually, think for ourselves?
It's not easy, but it's essential. It takes conscious effort, but there are definitely practical steps.
Okay, like what? Give us some tools.
Right. First, just build in a pause. Before you accept something, especially if it feels emotionally charged or everyone seems to agree, just stop. Ask yourself, wait, is this actually true? What's the evidence?
Demand evidence. I like that. Yeah. Simple but powerful.
Second, actively seek out different viewpoints. Don't just live in your filter bubble. Make an effort to read or listen to perspectives that challenge your own assumptions. It might be uncomfortable, but it's crucial.
Get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Exactly. Third, make fact-checking a habit. Seriously, before you share that viral post or believe that shocking headline, take a minute. Verify it with reliable sources.
So important now. It's like mental hygiene.
It really is. Fourth, and this is a big one, be willing to be wrong. Changing your mind when presented with new, solid evidence isn't weakness. It's intellectual honesty. It's growth.
Yeah, letting go of ego. Hard but necessary.
Totally. And finally, cultivate a healthy skepticism. Don't just automatically trust something because it comes from an authority figure or because the majority believes it. Question things respectfully. Think critically. Zimbardo himself, later in his career, talked a lot about how to resist negative situational forces, his steps toward heroism. Much of it boiled down to taking personal responsibility, maintaining awareness, not being afraid to dissent, and challenging unjust systems. It's about making active choices.
This has been, a really deep dive. These experiments, flaws and all, they just powerfully illustrate how much our environment, authority, and our peers shape us, sometimes in ways we don't even realize.
They absolutely do. And understanding these psychological currents isn't just interesting trivia. It's key to navigating the world more consciously. Whether you're at work, dealing with family, making financial choices, awareness is the first step toward resisting unwanted influence.
That's a fantastic takeaway. It makes me think, if our default setting is often to believe, to go along, how can you listening build in those moments of healthy doubt? What's one small thing you could question or verify today just to flex that critical thinking muscle?
Great question to ponder.
Absolutely. Well, that wraps up our deep dive for this time. Thanks so much for joining us. Remember to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
Yeah, and seriously, folks, do check out our buddy Micky's YouTube channel. He does some really fun videos, and he just dropped some new wine tasting content that's actually, really entertaining and informative. Go check it out. Show him some love.
You won't regret it. Good stuff over there. Thanks again for listening, everyone. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.